Revolutions Per Minute is a weekly radio show from the New York City chapter of the Democratic Socialists of America, recorded live at WBAI 99.5 in Brooklyn every Tuesday at 5. RPM is about doing the work to build a democratic socialist future. Every week, hear the latest news, analysis, and organizing experience from the minds and hearts of activists fighting every day in NYC. Join the movement at socialists.nyc.
You're listening to Revolutions Per Minute on WBAI, a socialist radio show and podcast from members of the New York City Democratic Socialists of America. I'm Lee Zishi, and I use she, her pronouns, and today we have Jabari Brisport in the studio. Jabari ran an amazing insurgent campaign as a socialist in 2017 for city council. We'll be talking a bit about that run, what he learned from it, and how we can get more socialists elected to city council and possibly even the White House. But first, we have the headlines with Jack Devine.
Yo, what's good, New York? This is Jack Devine with Revolutions Per Minute's headlines, brought to you by The Thorn. After the counting of absentee ballots in the Queen's DA race, Melinda Katz took a 20-vote lead, later reduced to 16, over Tiffany Caban. The slim margin triggers an automatic manual recount to start this week. Such a closely watched race is shedding light on New York's unusually restrictive voting laws and the difficulties faced by many voters in the state. A bill passed by the state legislature this session, but not yet signed by Governor Cuomo, could play a pivotal role in the outcome. For more details, check out our story on thethorn.nyc. In other news related to New York's criminal justice system, more than 200,000 low-level marijuana convictions were thrown out thanks to a law passed in Albany last month. But the New York Drug Policy Alliance suggested that the number should be closer to 900,000. The women's solitary confinement unit at Rikers Island is open again after being closed during the probe into Layli and Polanco's death last month. The Department of Corrections is free to torture the most vulnerable people in our society once again. 3 city cyclists were killed in less than a week, bringing the annual total to 15 and prompting Mayor de Blasio to renew his commitment to the action plan announced at the Department of Transit in 2017. I wouldn't hold your breath on de Blasio actually doing anything. Climate activists are divided over the compromise bill that Governor Cuomo signed last month. Eco-socialists continue to organize for democratization of energy ownership across New York State. Meanwhile, in Chicago, Alderman Carlos Ramirez Rosa says the new Democratic Socialist caucus in the city council will push for a municipal takeover of ComEd. In other news from the Midwest, Amazon warehouse workers in Minnesota plan to strike on Prime Day, the company's summer sales extravaganza. Back in New York, organizers with Con Mi Gente and Make the Road protested in front of Palantir's offices yesterday, demanding the corporation cancel its contract with ICE. The immigrant justice movement continues to spread across the country. Since last Sunday, June 30th, organizers with the Never Again Action campaign have taken direct action against ICE's reign of terror. Thousands of Jews and their allies have taken to the streets to protest not only the horrific concentration camps at the border, but the terrorizing of immigrant communities throughout the whole country. The organizers declared, quote, "We have seen this before, and when we say never again, we mean it. This is just the beginning. We are not stopping until ICE is shut down." They're planning a massive action to shut down ICE in D.C. on July 16th. Speaking of horrible crimes perpetuated by the American ruling class and the most vulnerable people in our society, Jeffrey Epstein, the billionaire money manager, was arrested in New Jersey on Saturday and charged with sex trafficking in connection with allegations that he recruited young girls for abuse at his homes in New York and Palm Beach. He was indicted in 2007 for sexually abusing children, but ultimately got just 13 months in a county jail, thanks to a deal signed by Alexander Acosta, then the U.S. Attorney for Miami, and now President Trump's Secretary of Labor. Epstein has long established relationships with Trump, who has been accused of raping a 13-year-old girl at one of Epstein's parties, and former President Bill Clinton, who has flown in Epstein's planes multiple times. It's almost like the American ruling class uses entrenched power to escape consequences for their moral depravity. Now back to Lee on how we can fight back against the American ruling class at the ballot box.
Our daily headlines are brought to you by The Thorn, an incredible weekly newsletter by NYC DSA Electoral Working Group, covering local politics and radical activism. You can subscribe at thethorn.nyc. This is Lee Zishi. I use she, her pronouns, and you're listening to Revolutions Per Minute. And we are joined today in the studio by Jabari Brisport. Jabari ran for city council in 2017 as a socialist, and we're going to really dig into that on today's show. But first, Jabari, can you just kind of introduce yourself a little bit and maybe tell our listeners what kind of work you're doing right now within DSA?
Yeah, no problem. Hi, everybody. This is Jabari Brisport. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a native New Yorker. I'm from Brooklyn originally, from Prospect Heights. And right now I'm a public school teacher, and I'm teaching math in Crown Heights to middle school students. And then inside of DSA, I'm predominantly doing work within the Afro-Socialist caucus. I really believe it's important that we bring more people of color into socialist organizing, and I believe that it's people of color that are already within the socialist world that should be leading that.
And what kind of campaigns in specific do the Afro-Socialists work on?
We're kind of connected to all the various campaigns within DSA. So we have members that are doing the Medicare for All stuff. We have members that were canvassing for New York Health Act, working on that, members that are doing electoral. A lot of us were helping on the Tiffany Caban campaign. Some of us are doing criminal justice reform with the campaign for an elected civilian review board, and some of us were doing, we're part of the winning campaign to do the campaign to decrease school suspensions.
Actually, intersectionality
yes.
in practice. You're listening to Revolutions Per Minute on listener-sponsored WBAI in New York City, broadcasting at 99.5 FM and streaming on all your favorite podcast apps. You can follow Revolutions Per Minute all the time on Twitter at NYCRPM. And today we are talking about what it would look like to elect a Democratic Socialist city council and also get a socialist into the White House. And we are joined by Jabari Brisport. So we are going to start off by listening to a speech that Jabari gave at a fundraiser while he was running for city council in 2017.
Give us a full Brooklyn welcome to Jabari Brisport! Yes, I did get detained today. Yes, I got some handcuffs on me. Yes, it was fighting against the Bedford Union Armory. And for those who don't know, who walked in late, it's this nasty project down in Crown Heights where the city is trying to sell away public land to a Trump-loving developer called BFC Partners that wants to build a lot of luxury condos. Yeah, terrible. So we've been fighting against the deal, fighting. Unfortunately, while I was handcuffed in the back room, the CLC voted yes on it. Hold on, it goes to the city council next, so we'll see if they shut it down. Hopefully we can. Hopefully we keep fighting against it. I did not see myself being in handcuffs a year ago or 2 years ago. 2 years ago, I was just finding out about Bernie Sanders and starting to feel the burn. And here I am, surrounded by a lot of love and a lot of great people running the most insurgent third-party campaign in recent New York history. Yeah, I am running as a member of the Green Party and also I'm also a member of DSA, and we're running on the Socialist ballot line because one of the things we believe in this campaign is that we need a world and an economy and a political system that's centered around people's needs, not just profit margins for the very wealthy. So just a reminder, we're fighting for healthcare as a human right, housing as a human right, a decent education for every single person, for Black lives to matter, and for women to be treated as equals in every single room they go into. So I want to thank you again. You heard the numbers. We knocked on 35,000 doors. We raised over $150,000 in private and public funds. And in about 7 days, I think we're going to show this city that when we fight for things that we believe in, we win.
And so that was Jabari in 2017. And when you didn't, ultimately actually win the seat on city council, I think there can be a lot of things that are considered a victory coming out of this. A lot of groundwork was laid, I think, for future campaigns. I know a lot of people who volunteered later on campaigns like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez or State Senator Julia Salazar, might have gotten some of their first door knocking experiences or phone banking on your campaign. But at the time when you ran in 2017, obviously Bernie Sanders had kind of made Democratic democratic socialism a little bit more popular, but there weren't, these big victories yet that we had seen here. So why did you decide to run for city council, and why did you decide to run on the socialist line?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So I got really radicalized into electoral politics from the Bernie Sanders campaign. I had mostly done issue-based campaigns, but I got really into electoralism with Bernie because it made me think of just really the concept that I could, rather than just fighting for specific issues against the politicians in office, I could elect somebody that agreed with me on pretty much everything, like Bernie Sanders did. And friends had mentioned I should run for office. They liked what I had to say, and I think the day after Trump getting elected, I was marching, and it was just raining and gloomy, and it just felt like hell had opened up in New York City. And I would just remember thinking to myself, this isn't enough. We're marching, and there's thousands of us out here, but until we get more people that are socialists or like-minded into actual office, nothing's going to change. And I wanted to do something local, and that's why I decided on city council.
And like I said, at the time when you ran, I think, a lot of this has really become much more popular to run as a socialist, but it wasn't, as popular, I think, at the time, even though Bernie Sanders had made it more popular. What was it like running as a socialist? Were people being don't do that, that's going to make you not elected? Or what was it like?
It's funny. It's one of the other actual candidates, she was a Democratic challenger to the incumbent in the Democratic primary, was you got to tone that down because it's throwing people off. But it really wasn't. People either seem to have either a positive view of socialism or just a neutral, what does that word mean? And even at one of the housing forums that we went to, I remember I was giving my speech, my stump speech, just my intro, and when I was talking about gentrification, I was it's caused by capitalism, and this entire audience of people that, whether they were new to socialism or not, cheered. And then when I said I was running as an open socialist, half the room still cheered. Nobody was "Ooh, God, what is that, Russia?" People were either into it or they were open to learning more.
Yeah, I was volunteering for you on election day, and I only had one person who was I'm not voting for a socialist. But there were so many people that were coming that were super, super excited. I was convinced that you were going to win by a landslide because so many people were coming up to me and telling me how excited they were. And I also, knocked some doors, and people really cared about the issues that you were running on, especially when you explained capitalism is creating these problems. These are the solutions. So, in the clip, we heard some of the things that you were running on. Can you talk a little bit about what your platform was and, how people resonated with that?
People really liked the idea of taking the war to the developers. I think people have been tired, especially housing activists, of playing defense against the real estate industry. And a lot of my thing was well, let's go at them. Let's focus on just working with nonprofit developers. I took a hard line of saying I would just work with nonprofit developers, and I thought it was a pretty hard line. And even by the end of the campaign, by some of the final forums, the other candidates were saying the same thing too, about wanting to only work or predominantly work with nonprofit developers. So there was that. I was also just talking about looking for vacancy taxes, taxes on flipping houses, looking for ways to get a blacklist on poor bad landlords or slumlords, really bringing the fight to them on housing, and people really responded to that.
Yeah, and the Bedford Armory deal was very much a central issue. Can you tell people, if they're not familiar, what that was all about?
Yeah, so the Bedford Armory was a huge city block-sized armory in Crown Heights that was defunct, empty for a while, and the community had been clamoring for the city to do something with it. And this company, BFC Partners, stepped in, and what they were going to do, they put all these lovely, sweet things in there, a recreation center and and spaces for nonprofits and this and that, and then tried to slip in a bunch of condos in the back, nobody would notice. And the community was absolutely not. That's going to gentrify the crap out of the neighborhood. We can't do that. And so there was a big uproar against that. We were fighting for 100% affordable housing. I was specifically pushing for something called a community land trust, which would basically put the entire armory into the hands of a nonprofit entity with community stakeholders and nonprofit developers. And it's it's a very socialist endeavor. And we fought and we fought and we fought. And I had forgotten that I was handcuffed the day of that speech that you played earlier, fighting against the CPC. But yeah, no, we fought, and we eventually got the condos out. We didn't get it 100% affordable. I think there ended up being a lot of market rate housing units in it at the end, but we definitely made a dent, and we definitely made our voices heard.
And what role did like city council have to play in that? You know, because that was like the office you were running for at the time, and what kind of like power did they have in that?
Yeah, one of city council's biggest powers in New York City is land use. Like, city council decides on whether or not they're going to bulldoze that 3-family home and build a 20-story, super complex right there. Like, city council sets the zoning limits. It sets, like, what you can build where. And ultimately, like, in a case of the Bedford Union Armory, it's the thumbs up or the thumbs down from the city council person that represents that district if we're going to have this luxury housing complex or have something that works for the community.
And so you were running as a socialist on these platforms. What was kind of the strategy to win? And obviously in all of DSA's campaigns, grassroots organizing is an incredibly important part of that. What did that look like on your campaign? We
start a number at the beginning of looking at the vote totals in the general and decided we needed around 15,000 votes to win. And I got around 9,000 in the end. But we decided we just need to reach a lot of people, especially voters that maybe didn't typically vote. That needed to, be awakened or want to come out to that. So we knocked on a lot of doors. We, typical things like, flyers, social media, and just getting out there with the community, like being out there with the protests and the rallies, like standing alongside the people and just meeting lots of people and asking them what was concerning to them.
And, in the end, you were talking about how many doors you knocked. Like, what were the numbers that you reached? And, like, how many people do you think, I mean, you probably don't have an exact number, but how many people came through? Because I remember being at your campaign office that week, and it was, like, packed. There was a lot of people out there, a lot of DSA members, a lot of Green Party folks, like, knocking on doors.
Yeah, thank you for playing that clip again, because I had forgotten. So we knocked on 35,000 doors, and I want to say, if I remember correctly, around 500 DSA volunteers came out. I forget how many in total, but we had a sizable operation for city council, and especially with on an independent line, that was just something that was like not seen before.
Yeah, and I mean, my personal experience on election day was that I think you really scared, the incumbent city councilwoman, because I remember like being out there. I was literally out there pretty much the entire day. So I was out there first thing in the morning. Well, it was worth it. It was definitely worth it. And so I was out there in the morning, and I think it was Lori Cumbo's like campaign manager kind of came up to me. She's like, well, he's not going to win, right? And I was like, I don't know. We've been knocking on a lot of doors, making a lot of phone calls. And I just saw this kind of like look like cross over her face where like, I think they were worried for a second. And then, an hour later, all of a sudden this like kid is like across the street, handing out flyers for her. And he didn't really seem to kind of just, you've seen some of those people out there who seem like they're getting paid or, they're somebody's kid and they don't, it's not like in their heart, right. They're not out there all day. And then at some point in the day, like somebody called the cops, like somebody from their campaign called the cops on me, and this like cop car rolls up and they're like, so we got a call that you were soliciting. And I was like, what I think you mean is electioneering. And I wasn't, because I talked to the cop this morning and I'm like totally like a far distance away. And, it was like a rainy, cold day, but that experience was really worth it for me. I talked to so many people, a couple people who had no idea really who they were voting for going into it, didn't really know what the issues were, and kind of, also had really great conversations, like knocking on doors with people. I'm one of those people who like hates canvassing. Like I actually enjoy it once I'm doing it. It's like that like fear, just like waiting for the door to open. But yeah, I think you really scared them. And I think, it's set up a lot of what we've seen kind of with DSA. Yeah. So like, what are some of the lessons that you feel like you learned in your campaign? And have you seen kind of any of that translate to other candidates, running with DSA?
Yeah, I mean, one big lesson is that like people are open to much bigger ideas than we give them credit for, and people are able to adjust much more quickly or rapidly than we give them credit for. And this wasn't a direct lesson that I transferred to another campaign, but again, something I noticed was like I was the only person saying, no, we should only work with nonprofit developers, and nobody really reacting strongly to that in the audience, nobody thinking that was a novel or radical idea, and seeing other politicians in the race adopt it. And similarly, then you get Alex Ocasio, like a year later, saying we're going to abolish ICE. She was the only person to say that at first, and then people start adopting it. because people can take on radical ideas very quickly. They do it on the right, the right of the political spectrum. Radical ideas pop up all the time. We're okay just doing radical left things, and similar to with like the notion of like decriminalizing sex work that's just being like hammered by Julia Salazar's campaign, by Tiffany Caban's campaign. Like people will, if you put out these bold ideas, people will adopt them.
Yeah, and I mean we did a whole episode last week on Tiffany Caban's campaign, and that's become such an interesting story since last week. But one of the things that the guests on the show were saying is that like when you're actually consistently organizing around these issues, and that when your campaign is really centered on these issues, and then from campaign to campaign, the organizing that's been happening and the knowledge that people learn actually like transfers really well, and that's how we're building a lot of power. I mean, are you excited with what you've kind of seen happen within the time since you've run?
I don't think anybody could have predicted that like DSA would become such a powerhouse in the electoral arena so quickly. Like I remember even after after my race was over, because we'd only run 2 city council races, people were just thinking about like, okay, we're going to, get things ready and we'll be ready for 2021. We'll be ready for the city council then. And then within a year later, we're electing somebody to Congress and we're like pushing people into state Senate and like, winning, knock on wood, like an entire borough for district attorney. Like our capacity has grown so rapidly and I've been so impressed. And
you've volunteered for a lot of these campaigns,
yes.
And what's that been like knocking on doors and some of your own personal experience of like talking to people, in communities about socialist values?
I love talking to people about values. Like I think maybe in like a past life I was like an evangelical Christian or something. I don't know. Just like I love like going up to doors and talking to people about a candidate I'm passionate about. It really energizes me. And especially when it's like they're hearing about it for the first time and they're kind of into it, that really excites me. I feel like I've sparked something in them.
And so you're listening to Revolutions Per Minute on listener-sponsored WBAI in New York City, broadcasting at 99.5 FM and streaming on your favorite podcast app. Today we have Jabari Brisport in the studio, and we are talking a bit about his very insurgent run and very powerfully run grassroots campaign for city council in 2017. And coming up in the show, we're going to start talking about what it would actually look like to have, like we heard in the headlines with Jack that, in Chicago, DSA members have been elected and now they're proposing, to take over their utilities. So first, let's talk a little bit about like what kind of powers does city council actually have?
Yep. I mean, one of the big things is land use, and then other things are just like building codes, especially with, the big expansive energy policy thing was like just a strengthening of building codes, making them more energy efficient. Criminal justice is a big thing. Education policy. I mean, the New York City Department of Education, transit. What am I missing? Commerce is a big thing, especially as socialists.
Yeah. And I mean, it seems like, too, I do a lot of organizing around climate change. And while obviously the dirty buildings bill was like a huge thing, to a lot of it seems that like city council's power is kind of like setting the direction, like obviously they're not always exactly lock in step with the mayor. But once they start doing progressive things, like he wants to keep up with that. And so it kind of influences, beyond just what.
Yeah.
They can do like legally. And so what do you think like a democratic socialist city council could accomplish?
I mean, I would love to see just thinking of the public power campaign like DSA is in coalition with, I would love to see municipalization of our energy. I think that'd be great. I would love to see a public bank throughout New York City, especially if we could tie, like one of the things that we did in the racial justice working group was pushing for postal banking in the Bronx, and just the notion of creating a citywide public bank that could be a model for cities or just our country in general would be really, really awesome. I'm sure like socialists would do something. We could come up with something radical on transit policy. I mean, it's not a driving city. I don't know why people want it to be. Maybe in like the furthest parts of the outer boroughs, but really in like most of it, it's not a driving city. And land use, again, we really would be able to put like a stopgap in a lot of just like the real estate developer fueled gentrification, like housing crisis. I'm sure we would find a way to find homes for the 70,000 homeless people in New York City with a socialist city council.
Yeah, and since you brought up the Public Power Campaign, I'm just going to give a quick plug for the Eco-Socialist Working Group that is hosting a town hall in Astoria on July 22nd with council member Constantinides. So, it is important to have allies in this. And, I was at a public hearing recently at City Council, and council member Constantinides was calling out Con Edison, just straight up being like, hey, I asked you to prove these things and you're not here. Like, how can we trust you? And having, people on city council that aren't bought out by the Con Eds of the world or the national grids of the world. That's really exciting.
What's great too is I think we're starting to see even politicians in office be, if not scared of us, be more wanting to be on our side. I mean, I see Jimmy von Bramer in Queens also wanting to what are the socialists doing? What's the DSA doing? And that's a great power to have, to know that people start to look towards us, even elected officials, as a bellwether of what they should be fighting for. Yeah,
and so we have a lot of elections coming up for City Council in 2021. Can you tell us a little bit about what that landscape looks like and what maybe the potential is there?
Yeah. So the way New York City elections just end up with the term limits, we just end up having one election for City Council where there's just a handful of seats that are up for grabs, and then another election where there's a buttload up for grabs. And 2021 is going to be a buttload up for grabs of over 30 seats out of our 50 that will be term limited, and it's going to be a huge race all over New York City. And I know in DSA we're planning to do I think 7 or around then 7 socialists elected, which would be the biggest undertaking we've never run 7 campaigns at once, but I think we could, and that's really exciting and really dope.
Yeah, what kind of power do you think, you're talking about these city council people kind of oh, what is, DSA doing? And I remember last week people were saying that, politicians who didn't even endorse Tiffany Caban were showing up at the the party, the soon to be hopefully victory confirmed. And so what kind of power do you think we've built? And also talking about running 7 elections at once, that's an insane amount of work. What would that actually take to do that?
It would take a lot. I mean, luckily, New York City has a wonderful, it's a very progressive financing set up for city candidates. We have a public matching fund system, and I think it actually just got improved. So it's $8 to $1. So if somebody donates from New York City, donates $25 to a candidate, it turns into $225 really. So I bring that up because you would need to raise a lot of money for these campaigns. My campaign, we raised $50,000, and then we had $100,000 in matching funds. But $50,000 times 7 candidates, it's $350,000. It's a lot. And then just the volunteer operation is really what we'll have to finagle, because thousands. It would take thousands of foot soldiers, and we'll get there. But it's just it's definitely going to be a new challenge that we have not done before.
Yeah, I mean, do you think DSA has grown enough and built that enough electoral power to do that?
I think we will by 2021. I would say it's going to be a bit of a jump. I definitely think we should do it. We'll see. In the next year, we'll be running hopefully, several campaigns at once, and then we'll be ready for 7 city council members in 2021.
Yeah, it's a really very exciting prospect and fun thing to think about. So, do you think with 7 people on there, that'd be enough to really kind of steer city council, or?
Yeah, you see people already talking the buzz around the Chicago Socialists, and there's only 6 of them, and we got to do 7 because we got to do better than Chicago. So people are talking about a buzz there, and I think they're a similar size, around 50-ish seats. But no, 7 is a sizable number. It's not a majority. You would need 26 to be absolute majority of socialists, but people are just scared of Julia Salazar, and she's 1 senator out of 62 in the state Senate. Can you imagine if we had 7 out of 51 seats on the city council? That's a big deal. And then, other, non-socialists might be scared about their re-elections coming up if they get on the bad side of the socialists. Are they going to primary me? And we will. So should watch out.
Are there any particular communities or neighborhoods or regions that DSA is already thinking about that would be really great places for people to run, or is that all?
I mean, any place that's like overlapping with where we've already laid down territory. So like, my city council district, but also just like Bushwick, Williamsburg, where Julia Salazar overlaps. Definitely South Brooklyn again, where they built all that stuff with Qatar El Yatim, Astoria, Jackson Heights. I mean, a lot of the places where, Alex Ocasio did well and, Tiffany Caban were doing well, like all of them.
Just take it all. Take the whole city. You're listening to Revolutions Per Minute on listener-sponsored WBAI at 99.5. We've got Jabari Brisport here in the studio. We've been talking about, the electoral work that DSA has been doing since his run in 2017 and the prospects of getting Democratic Socialists elected to City Council in 2021. But before we get to 2021, we have another very big election coming up. As we heard in a clip earlier, you were very inspired by Bernie Sanders' run in 2016. Do you think we can get a socialist elected to the White House in 2020?
Yes, if we can get past the Democratic primary, I think we're a shoo-in. It's just, the pull of some of the establishment and like just the media, like, the blackout that's starting to happen again. And just, I saw this headline of like, it was like Joe Biden in first and like Harris and Warren tied for third. And I was like, Bernie's in second, right? So, fighting against that, I mean, I think that, Biden might see a lot of the initial enthusiasm start to wane as people start to realize, he's not Obama, he's Joe Biden. And, that there's not much going for him, especially considering his record. And I think Bernie can return to being the front runner, and we can win the primary and then win the election. Yeah,
and what was it in 2016 that kind of inspired you about Bernie Sanders?
I loved his platform, and my knowledge of like healthcare policy was quite low in 2016, and when I heard like this is when he said, we're going to have Medicare, but Medicare for all. I was like, oh my God, that's the most genius idea I've ever heard of. And then when I thought it was like actually just a thing in like the rest of the developed world, I was actually very taken aback and like shocked that we were so far behind. So it was hearing that, and then just like him talking about the 1% and talking about class warfare in a way that I hadn't heard any other politician talk about really, really inspired me, because I think so many of the ills tie down to or connected to just like income inequality.
Yeah, and I think, even how you were explaining that in your campaign speech, and it's kind of, for me, the thing that like made it click is like, sometimes it's like understanding the bad first, kind of in a way, before you can really understand what this like new vision could look like, So like for me, it was like, oh, like watching fracking happen, like, oh, you're being sacrificed, your water's being sacrificed, our climate is being sacrificed, like all for fossil fuel industry profits. Like that's what capitalism is. And, like understanding that's like, oh, that's why we need, democratic socialism. And Bernie was the only candidate, while Democrats like Obama and Clinton were like selling fracking to the world, he was brave enough to be like, oh, we should ban fracking. And now this year coming around, there's multiple candidates that are saying that. But, at the same time, I feel like so often the conversation that we're having, around presidential elections, like while people kind of they touch on the issues, but we're not really talking about like what's affecting Americans a lot of the time. It's still that horse race journalism of like, well, who's in first? Let's skip over second because we're not going to say that guy's name. So like what are the issues you think that are actually like, especially since you're somebody who's out there, knocking on doors for different campaigns and talking to people pretty regularly, like what are the issues we're not talking about right now when it comes to the presidential elections?
I think housing could be a much bigger part of the presidential election. Like people are struggling, and like it's not even just an urban thing. Like people are struggling everywhere, urban, suburban, rural. Like people, like housing is unaffordable, and it's because in capitalism we've decided to like have homeownership be like a wealth building mechanism, and you can't have housing that's affordable at the same time as it being like an investment. So we've put ourselves into this awful contradiction where it's like if you own property, you're great, and if you don't, you're just going to struggle. And you're going to be like really like screwed in terms of like what you're going to do. So I would love to see just like I would love to see a whole debate on like housing, and like I would love to see Bernie unveiled this awesome like public housing expansive policy, how we're going to rebuild like NYCHA in New York City, but also just public housing and deeply invest in that throughout the country.
Yeah, well, maybe we can start doing some like organizing. I mean, it's looking like Sunrise Movement and all these people that have been, organizing, and they were outside the DNC for like a couple of days, fighting for a debate just on climate change because, they were in Miami, and it's like, oh, the city is about to go underwater. Yes. Let's very briefly talk of this and move right along. So maybe, you can start the organizing for a housing debate. But we are seeing, an influence even of the organizing that's happening here on certain issue-based campaigns, like you mentioned earlier, where Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, came out to support Tiffany Caban, and all of a sudden they're kind of having this conversation about decriminalizing sex work. Yeah. So that's like a very exciting thing to see that, local politics can actually really influence the national thing. And so like, how important do you think, I think a lot of times so much of our energy gets obsessed with getting somebody into the presidency. And that's obviously very important, especially when you have somebody like Trump in there now to get him out. But how important do you think it is kind of local politics versus this big national thing that everybody gets so obsessed with?
Local politics are so important, especially state legislatures, which just control so much of our everyday lives, and also big things on housing, and even more so in New York, especially just the MTA is just, it's a state thing. Like just the way we literally just get to work or get to school or get wherever we're going, it's all a state issue. And when it's not working well, that's a state issue. And if we want it to work better, that's a state issue. If we want to find, like a single payer healthcare system in just New York, that's a state issue. And so these local policies are actually very, very immediate to our everyday lives.
And so are you familiar with what, is starting to happen here in New York to get Bernie elected?
I mean, I know DSA is doing a lot of canvassing doing a lot of voter registration. But that's all I know so far. So
yeah, and I'm not that sure yet either. But I know, especially in New York too, there's really kind of crazy laws about how early you have to register to vote or be, in the right party. I think it's October or something.
We just passed a sweeping bunch of electoral reform bills, and I forget if that one got switched, but it used to be you have to switch your party 30 days before the previous election, and so that came out to be October, and which threw a lot of people off in the 2016 because it was I had to switch to Democrat by October of 2015, like 7-8 months before the primary. That's why how was anybody supposed to know that? So yeah, we have some of the most arcane election laws, and I know we got a sweeping legislation. Hopefully, that party registration thing was one of them. Yeah,
and I don't know, it's absolutely insane. And obviously what we're seeing too, in Queens is that it's really hard to make sure your vote is counted for. And it's insane that there's not just automatic registration and everybody can just decide on election day, I want to get out to vote. But we're working on it. We're getting it step by step. Another issue too that really hasn't come up or has kind of just come up a little bit, I think, on the fringes and hasn't been a central issue in the election that I've seen you post about before and the Afro-Socialists talk about is reparations. Can you maybe talk a little bit about where people stand on that and what you would like to see in the conversation happening during the presidential election?
Awesome. So reparations is a bunch of things. And, I've had a chance to there's so much literature about it. So that's just the first thing I wish more politicians were would take a more wide lens to it. It's not just a check or it's not just this one policy here. It's a wide lens of things. I mean, a check would be part of it, but it's also just restitution, just an acknowledgement of harm done. So that's instead of Confederate statues, if we saw statues that some homage to the fact that we had slavery, we have to acknowledge that we as a country had slavery, and we apologize for it. Restitution of rights, of voter rights, of property, to of just freedom to people that have been incarcerated from the drug war, from this, from that, and better education on African American history and just the notion of race in this country, and really I would just a more holistic view and this is really from just the neoliberal influence, just the way they think. It's people have reparations and they're oh, okay, a check for black people. And it's so much more comprehensive than that.
And has Bernie said anything about this yet?
Yeah, no, he has. It's not enough. I mean, I'm happy he moved on it better, because at first he was like, no, it's too divisive. But now he's like, he would support HB 40, which is a bill in Congress that would start a commission to explore reparations. And he supports something called the 10, 20, 30 plan, which would just really deeply invest in like some like 30 poorest counties in the country over the next 20 years, which are, many of them are counties for people of color, but it's not quite there yet,
And have any other candidates like even mentioned it, or?
Kamala has, Warren has, Mariam Williamson has, bless her heart. But I forget exactly what their policies were.
And, since 2016, are there other issues that like the Afro-Socialists are working on that you just kind of are seeing like not at all being brought up in the elections, or that you would like to see maybe Bernie take like a stronger stance on? And I mean, because, like black voters in the South was like not an area he did well on. And, even other people running here in New York City are very often still being carried by, like young, white, kind of gentrified millennials, who might have like the right ideals. They believe in socialists, but they're still, I don't know, it seems like socialists are still kind of struggling to really make that connection. It seems like the policies are in line, but it's not reaching, and that's not, that's like our fault.
No, that's an awesome question. The Afro-Socialist Caucus is not at the place yet where we're launching our own internal campaigns. Mostly we're focused on like ensuring that the campaigns that DSA is running have a lens to it that respects and like honors the input of people of color. And that's what we have the capacity to do right now, and that's what's really effective right now. Although what I would love to see is I would love to see this caucus be the leading voice on reparations and that debate, because I'm actually just very worried that if we're not the voice, then it'll be like neoliberal black people and people of color that will be the leading voice on reparations, and they're going to be like, oh, it's a check, and that's it. Or like just looking at like Kamala's latest housing policy, which is just like, I think it was like $25,000, a family or whatever towards home ownership, which is just like, one, not enough, but also like home ownership you can't have like home ownership be the goal at the same time as having affordable housing. So it's just like her diving deeper into this contradiction. So that would be it. I would just love to have us be the leading voice on reparations.
Cool. Soon we'll be opening up the phone lines in a couple minutes. You're listening to Revolutions Per Minute on WBAI 99.5. You can find us on all your favorite podcast apps, as well as Twitter anytime at NYC RPM. And we've been talking to Jabari Brisport about his run in 2017 for city council and what it would look like to take over city council in 2021, and even before that, taking over the White House in 2020. Before we open up the phone lines, one more question for you, Jabari. What do you think? I don't know. What could America look like if we actually had a socialist in the White House?
Socialist administration, I think, would look a lot less imperialist. So that's one thing. We would probably be spending a lot less money on war. We wouldn't need the hundreds of military bases around the country, and that's money that could then be spent on ending homelessness, because we could have ended homelessness 50 years ago. We have enough homes to do it. Ending hunger, because we produce enough food to end hunger. Ending poverty, because we have enough money to end poverty in this country. And restructuring the economy around the needs of people. I mean, we have enough to have everybody live a decent life at minimum.
Yeah, we could pay for that newfangled Green New Deal,
yes.
That AOC is talking about. I saw this video today. I guess DC was like flooding. And, I don't know if you've ever been in the subways in DC. They kind of look like beehives. There's like this weird kind of like grid pattern. And there's just like a huge hole. And there's just water like rushing through, kind of similar to what happened here in New York City, where like Grand Central was flooding. And it's like these people keep talking about how you're going to like pay for a Green New Deal. Like, well, how are we going to pay when our
City
MTAs, yeah, are underwater. And so we're now going to open up the phone lines to hear from you, the listeners. You can call us at 212-209-2877. Let us know what you'd like to see in a socialist city council or a socialist White House. Again, that number is 212-209-2877, and we will take your calls. We've got a caller on the line. You're live on WBAI.
Hello?
Hey, yeah, we can hear you.
Hi, my name is Erebos, and I think the shortcoming of a lot of these new or neo-socialist movements is they have no economic program. Right? A lot of things that people want to get involved in, they all very much needed, and they're all very much important for this immigration, LGBTQ, pay equity, the environment, and on and on. But there is no...
Oh, I think we accidentally lost him, but any thoughts on that, Jabari?
I mean, I love the idea of I wouldn't say there's no economic program, but I definitely love the idea of amplifying that. And I'm the support of a maximum wage. I think there should be a cap on once you've made a certain amount of money, it's what are you really going to do with that extra $1 million? Really, what are you going to do with it? And even when I was running, I was I pledged to take the median salary of my district when I was running. That's something I saw Kashama Sawant do. She's a socialist out in Seattle. And I was well, maybe I can use that extra money to hire more staff and do more constituent services and run a campaign office or an official office that really meets the needs of my people.
Yeah, let's ban billionaires. We've got another caller on the line. Caller, you are live on WBAI.
Hi, good evening. This is very refreshing to hear some revolution and some movement that we really don't hear on the mainstream and on the grassroots are really vibrating on WBAI in this particular show right now. And I think, are you familiar, Jabari? I really like the ideas and the concepts and the action that Jabari has taken. And I really like to connect with him, meet with him. And I have something that we've been working on for years. It's called equity sharing among homeowners. Are you familiar with that?
Equity sharing, is that like a co-op?
No. Okay, good.
No.
Well, so I don't want to give it all away over the radio, but definitely, man, there is some opportunity to beat back the banksters. And I would really like to, I'm sure we're all doing everything we can to beat back the banksters, right? So I really just got really excited to hear that there's a movement on reparations in terms of getting away from those who would just ask for just a check. I agree with you 100%. You want to really connect with ADOS. They're really doing some really great informative information about reparations. ADOS. You check them out. It's a brother out in L.A., Queen Mother Moore. He's related to her. His name is Anthony Moore. So, but yeah, I'm so excited that BAI is on the air, and we need the station, and independent, journalism is here, and this is just a great time to hear this brother Jabari running for city council. So I don't know, you didn't make it in, did you?
I did not. No. The next time I'll be back.
But that's okay. Though. But your platform is really tight. I would really like to talk to you though, and because you're doing some things I like to tie in with.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely. Let's connect. I mean, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter. I won't give my phone number over the radio, but
I know you're not.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah. How do I find you? I can hang up. I can listen to you.
Jay Brisport on Twitter.
Say it again.
Jay Brisport on Twitter. Just DM me.
How you spell it?
JBRISPORT.
Right. Great. Okay, you guys.
Well, thanks so much for calling in and your support of WBAI. And remember, listeners, we are listener-sponsored, so we can't do this without you. We also have one more caller on the line. Caller, you are now live on WBAI.
Good evening. My name is Victor Monterosa from Newark, New Jersey. I really, just like the last caller, wants to say that I appreciate always. I try to listen every Tuesday, and every time I do, I'm always pleasantly surprised with the ideas and the concepts that you guys are saying, not only because they're ideas and concepts, but because they're, we see that action's going on. And I really appreciate the comment about it's important to get people of color into office, but being from a place like Newark, and we see this in lots of cities across the country, we get people of color in, and they are neoliberal or right-wingers, and then they're caught up in machine politics, and what we get is a very no type of change. We get entrenched further into capitalism and really more into poverty. I want to say that we really want to bring change to Newark. We tried during the last election and gave it a really good run. We had a slate of 4 people who, with a team behind us that are a bunch of activists. And I'm sure you guys know this. I'm not saying this to you guys, but more to anyone who actually wants to run. Start building your bases. Start calling up everyone. Start doors. If someone doesn't see you 7 times in a row, they're not going to vote for you. And it's so sad because we carry these really good platforms. We have these really good ideas. The last thing I want to say is I think we really need to democratize our workspaces, even at that municipal level. And if we can build co-ops, or if we can figure out a way to pull people out of those neoliberal policies and make it so that we're building community wealth through these co-ops, then hopefully we start seeing some of the more municipal change to the left instead of being entrenched in these machine politics that are really awful. Thanks again, and really good job.
Thanks so much for calling in and for your support. And do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I just want to thank you so much, especially just one thing I forgot to say reminded me, bring up the notion of people need to see you 7 times. And you'd be surprised at how much a personal touch does. I mean, there was one person I met on election day who said hi on the way in, and on the way out, he said he voted for me specifically because he had just met me, because he was planning not to vote for anybody for that seat because he didn't like the incumbent, but he liked my platform, but he didn't know who I was and never met me, but seeing me on his way in allowed him to vote for me.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely talked to people on election day too who didn't know who to vote for, and just having a conversation with somebody and actually understanding what your values were and what you were running on, which, you can send out even great lit, but it's really hard to convey those kind of things, especially, critiques of capitalism on a flyer in somebody's door. So, saw the same thing on election day. And we have one more caller on the line. You are now live on, you're live on WBAI.
Hello, hi. This is going to be a slightly difficult call. I did vote for Bernie Sanders in the 2016 in the primary against Hillary Clinton, but I live in Bedford-Stuyvesant, and I'm black. I'm part of the indigenous black population, so we've been here a long time, and our neighborhood is gentrifying. And there are good things and bad things about it. But the thing is, I find on the local, and also I hope Tiffany Caban wins, because her issue, I mean, she's much better than than the choices. But particularly, I don't know you, Jabari, but particularly with some of the other DSA people I see, I mean, these are the kind of upwardly mobile people that are moving in, that all have laptops, I mean, you're black, right?
I am, yes.
Are you black? You don't talk like a black person, and then now you're going to say, well, how can you say something like that?
Yeah, how can you? I'm kidding.
Well, but the thing is, this is what you all are going to have to deal with, is that you have an indigenous population here that on the issue level, you guys are good. You guys are really good. But as far as machines and as far as delivering basic services, what are you going to, we have a participatory, what do they call it? Participatory funding thing here. And they voted $250,000 for a freaking dog park. And, no, but I mean, but the people that actually participated in the election and voted are people that would probably vote for Bernie Sanders. You know what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying. I mean, so how do you expect in other words, what the previous caller said about machine politics in Newark and places like that, it is true. But then again, on the other hand, if we get a kind of democratic socialist kind of local level representation, are we just going to have a flip to another kind of class? A class that uses computers, a class that's on the internet all the time, a class that, knows how to access grants, a class that's educated. You know exactly what I'm saying, sir.
Yeah.
Can you answer my question?
Yeah, I love that question so much because, look, we definitely don't want to, get rid of one system of oppression, then replace it with a totally new one. And I think a lot of it will be coming from just, increased base building in these communities. Thank you. I'm happy that you came and spoke on the radio about, how you wish that money was not spent on a dog park. I would agree. When I vote on participatory budgeting, I mostly vote for projects that are either education or just things to make life easier on the elderly. Those are my priorities. And a lot of that comes from me just, being in the community and knowing that's what's important to a lot of the people that I'm speaking with. And I would assume, I've been very proud of the work DSA has done in terms of connecting with communities and amplifying them. And I really like the things that we're fighting for. I like that we're fighting for healthcare for all and climate and our energy system in New York City that works for all, fighting, to protect immigrants, fighting to reform criminal justice. And I really feel that we're doing a lot to connect with communities and that these are things that the communities in New York want. And I would also agree that you can always go deeper in that. So I would love to connect with you and just connect with more people in Bed-Stuy. Really, what are the things that are important to you? I would love to also we'll have a chat. We have a chat and see maybe we'll find out what you voted for, and maybe you didn't see funding for it, and that's upsetting because participatory budgeting makes us fight each other over crumbs, and we feel man, I really wanted that money for my park, and it went to this dog park, and why are we fighting over the crumbs when there's so much money that the rich are hoarding? So thank you for bringing that up, and it's definitely something we should continue working on.
So if you've liked what we've talked about today, make sure you check out past episodes of Revolutions Per Minute. And if you want to get involved more in the electoral work that DSA is doing, the Brooklyn Electoral Working Group has a meeting on July 11th. There's also lots of voter registration. As we mentioned, you have to register very early in New York. And you can find all of these different events coming up with DSA at socialist.nyc. I know they also need volunteers right now for the Tiffany Caban campaign. A lot of this work doesn't end on Election Day. So you've been listening to Revolutions Per Minute on listener-sponsored WBAI with Jabari. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and we will catch you next week. You're here every Tuesday.